Everybody, and welcome to the City Council meeting of June 15th, 2021. It looks like everyone's on summer break. The audience is small today, so welcome to all of you who are attending the meeting. We will start today with our chaplain prayer and pledges, and today we are honored to have Mr. Ralph Dawkins, our police department chaplain, to offer us in prayer and in the pledges, if you would, please.
Good morning, everyone. Let us pray. Father, thank you for the opportunity to invoke your word through prayer into this meeting. I pray for those that are in authority over this city. I pray and lift up the mayor, her staff, and assistants, and city council members, the city manager, and every person and department that is instrumental in leading and directing our city. I pray that you would bless them to work together in unity to tackle the agendas that are on today. May you keep your division, may you keep division and hidden agendas from among them. And I pray that you would give them godly wisdom, direction, and instructions on how to lead, manage, and operate in the city and all of its departments. I pray that you would give these servant leaders knowledge, wisdom, and courage on how to deal with and tackle the issues of our community, our families and facilities and businesses. I ask your blessings upon these leaders over our community in which we live and pray. Just as your word declares in Chronicles chapter 20, that when we don't know what to do, our eyes are turned on you. Just as you told Ezekiel the prophet that you would make him a watchman or a watchman over the city, over Israel, I pray for the city leaders that they would be godly watchmen and watchwomen over our city. Lastly, I pray for the police chief and the police force, the sheriff's department, and all those that continue to pray and protect and serve our city, the fire department, and all the first responders, that you would bless our city with economic prosperity, that you would draw in and attract to our city industry, businesses, and corporations that would produce jobs and revenue for our city, to help it to grow and to prosper. I commit all these things to you concerning our city, and regardless of how things may look in the natural, I confess that your word, that you are well able to bring to pass everything that we have prayed for in the city council meeting today. In Jesus' name, amen and amen. Pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas,
one state, under God, one and indivisible.
This has to be a first. We have no proclamations or recognitions this morning, so we'll immediately go into public comment. Issues or concerns not on the regular agenda may be raised by the public at this time. Citizens should speak from the podium, address all comments to the dais, begin by stating their name and address or single-member district number, and limit their remarks to less than 3 minutes. Do we have anyone here today who would like to come forward and offer public comment?
Good morning, Madam Mayor, Council, City Manager, and other elected officials present. My name is Shirley Spears. I live in Single-Member District 5. I'm here just to make comment again on the situation for the restrooms at Martin Luther King Park. We presented a petition and concern to the body in March. To this date, we have not had a status report. We are asking for a status. We're aware that there were a few grants that were available for cities, particularly for parks and recreation, that expired in May. And we understood when we were here in March that staff would be looking to see how we could fund. We would also be searching for clarification on whether or not it was a community or neighborhood park, and some resolution to assist the community and the residents across the city of San Angelo that have signed and requested that restrooms be installed. As we approach another Juneteenth weekend, this coming weekend, we have a lot of plans, a lot of activities, but again, the unfortunate situation at that park in such a celebration is that there are no restroom facilities for anyone of any age. So we are here again just to remind the council that we did petition you all, we did make the recommendation that you get back with us. We understood that you would, and we are asking for an update as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. Any further public comment? With none, we will move on to our consent agenda. I will ask each council member if there's an item they would like to pull off of consent agenda, and I will start by Larry. Lane?
Ma'am.
Lucy?
No, ma'am.
Harry?
No, ma'am.
Tom?
No, ma'am.
Tommy?
No, ma'am.
With that, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda
So
as
moved.
presented? Moved by Lane,
Second.
seconded by Tommy. All of those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Motion, consent agenda will be approved 7-0. We will now move into our regular agenda for the day, and we'll start with comments regarding items on the regular agenda may be made by the public when each item is discussed as outlined above. Applicants, proponents, and appellants are accepted from the time limit above and must limit their remarks to less than 5 minutes. We will start with item A, consider adopting a customer service agreement as a supplement to the existing residential service application and commercial service application for water, sewer, and trash service. Andy, you're on.
Morning, Mayor, Council. Andy Vaselio, Assistant Director of Water Utilities. This morning I want to present to you a customer service agreement as part of an improvement to our cross-connection control program. This is required by TCEQ. And
Is this a new requirement?
No, ma'am. It is an existing requirement, but we are trying to improve what we already have in place. We already have some things in our ordinances, but to try and tighten up what we have locally to allow the staff to really protect human health. That is our primary goal. And there's two primary focuses to it: backflow prevention and then lead-based materials. And so with that, I'd like to go ahead and start the presentation. By TCEQ requirements, here are some of the rules. The first one is to adopt a plumbing ordinance, regulations, or customer service agreements. So we have already, as a city, adopted a plumbing ordinance, and that's through development services through our building permit section. Regulations would be an ordinance. We do have some ordinances in place, but we do need to strengthen them, and that will be coming in the future, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. And today we're looking at customer service agreements. These are required by TCEQ and definitely recommended. From the more provisions we have in place, the stronger our program can be.
Okay, let's stop right there. On the
ma'am.
CSI, we don't have CSIs, right? So when it says require customer service inspection, we bring people from other cities into our city to do these inspections?
We have in the past, over the past few months, we've brought in folks from Lubbock, Brownwood, and a few other cities. But currently, we do have 2 CSI licensed staff members. One is myself. I recently passed the exam. And secondly, we hired Mike Purcell from the engineering department, and he recently passed his exam as well. So we
Okay.
do have 2 staff that are currently licensed.
Thank you.
The second item there is the customer service inspections, which is going on-site and reviewing for the lead materials and the backflow prevention needs. And then where a backflow prevention device is necessary, to recommend that and have that in place by the private users, and then to have them tested annually for, depending on the device. Some of them, such as a double check, they're required to be tested on installation, but not annually. Again, there's different type of devices. Some don't have to be tested at all other than upon installation.
Are there different regulations for residential versus commercial versus industrial versus just a regular business? So
It's more based on the hazards, so they have health hazards and non-health hazards. So a health hazard would require a higher level of backflow prevention. So what I would say is typically on an industrial or commercial customer, those have a higher level of hazards depending on use of the water within their facilities. So that's the basis of So here's an example
One
of
second,
Can I
Lane has a
answer that?
question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So, based off the hazards, residential sprinkler system with the backflow.
Yeah, irrigation would be one of them, whether it's commercial or residential. Regarding to an irrigation system, the primary function, or the primary level depends on whether it has chemical injection or whether it has on-site sewage, like a septic tank and a drain field. Those are considered health hazards. If it doesn't have those, then it's considered a non-health hazard by TCEQ.
Everybody that would fall into that category would have an annual inspection.
If they have a health hazard.
If they have
That would
a-
require a reduced pressure backflow assembly. And so with those tests are required annually. But if it's a non-health hazard,
System on a house with a septic system.
correct, or chemical injection.
Most irrigation systems aren't connected to the septic system,
That is correct. That is
It'd have
correct.
to be-
And most of them
right.
have separate meters from the residential
correct?
as well.
Has to be connected, not just a house that has septic and a sprinkler system.
Sorry, sir?
You're not going to require a inspection for a house that has a sprinkler system with a septic, sorry.
Well, if it has an
Not
irrigation.
connected or anything, but just a house that, let's take Butler Farms. They
Yeah,
have
if
septic.
it has an irrigation system
Uh-huh.
and they have on-site sewer, at that point it becomes considered a health hazard by TCEQ. So that would require a higher level of backflow prevention. And so because of human waste, if you will, through the septic tank gets treated, but it's still being used to be spread across the area through the drain field, it becomes, by TCEQ standards, a health hazard at that point.
That's a lot of people. That could be a lot of people to have this requirement for.
The requirement's already in place through TCEQ.
Okay.
So it's not a change.
No, it is not a change. It is
It's
just
been there.
us improving our program to promote the public health. So there's nothing from TCEQ standards that's causing this. It is just us working with TCEQ to improve what we have in place already.
My question resorts to how enforceable is that?
Well, they're not going to be out there on a daily basis checking on it. So, I mean, that's an impossible task. So, and the reality is that we've already had this in place already.
Correct.
And so it's not something that's new. This is ongoing and it's been ongoing. So we're not asking someone to step it up. This is,
Yeah, and in general, our primary function and focus will be on the commercial industrial entities because those present the highest hazards.
Right.
Residential, we won't be looking for, I mean, if they have a backflow device that requires annual inspection, that is through what's called our VPO system, which traces our backflow devices and the testing requirements. And so they will be sent a letter, which they are currently, every year as a reminder to have those devices tested. But we're not going to be primarily focused on residential entities as we do these CSIs.
they still will receive the notification. So it's a heads up notification.
Yes, if they have that device already tested. For residential, we'll primarily be focused on complaint-based. If that makes sense.
Okay. Continue.
So the three primary emphases as part of the customer service agreement is, number one, right of entry, which basically it's an agreement signed by the customer saying that city staff have their approval, if you will, to enter their premises and do these inspections. One thing I do want to point out, as what's called the water purveyor by TCEQ, we as a city are required to have proper backflow, or to enforce proper backflow prevention, not just to our meter, but all the way through their facility. So as we do these CSIs and we're looking through these industries, these commercial entities, it's our responsibility to make sure the furthest tap in that business is safe for public consumption. And that is a TCEQ requirement.
That's been, this is not new. This has
Correct.
always been there.
Yes, ma'am. You are correct. The second one is a lead ban, and these are handed down from EPA through TCEQ, and it's just making sure there's not a high level of lead in the pipe, in the solder, things like that, in the plumbing systems. Well, lead has serious consequences on human health at high levels over an extended period of time. And then the last item is...
Hold on one second.
Oh,
Harry
I'm
has a
sorry, Harry.
question.
So from my perspective, I guess my question is this. we've done this before, right? So the customers really know that somebody from the city has the right to come in and take a look at this. The lead ban has always been there. What we're trying to do is strengthen the enforcement. Is that my understanding?
You're exactly correct.
Okay.
Yes. And we as staff are taking a heightened emphasis to promote this program.
I think one of the key things that we're doing today is going back to the public and making sure they understand what we have done, what we're going to do, and what we're going to continue to do. Most of this has been in existence already, but I know we haven't talked about this as a council for over 4 years, and I don't know how many years before that. So because of the contamination issue that happened in February, it's timely that we update at a city council meeting what is in place, how we manage it, and how we're going to manage it. So there isn't so much newness here. It's really, this is communication about what exists and what will continue to be a policy.
Yes, ma'am, you're exactly correct. And in addition, we will be completing more and more CSIs. Part of the focus that we want to do is hiring staff. We've already hired Mike Purcell. As I mentioned before, I'm CSI certified as well. So we'll be trying to get out to these businesses, industries, probably annually, once we are staffed appropriately, just to do a double check to make sure. The one thing, and we've already done and completed a few of these, dozens of these actually, and in doing so, as we're trying to educate these customers, we're explaining to them that we're not saying that you will do this, but there is a potential for people doing plumbing outside of getting a plumbing permit. And those are the type of things that we can only detect by being on site. And by being on site and potentially protecting them and protecting their employees as well and their customers who may try and use a restroom or drink out of a faucet there. So that's our purpose here.
Okay, continue.
And then we just discussed there the enforcement component. So here is a picture of one of the inspection forms. So the CSI inspections are required for new construction, for existing services where there's a change or an addition of materials. Both of these items are typically picked up by city plumbing inspectors when they do their plumbing inspection. What we're trying to focus on now and to add a little more emphasis is the third one, a reason to believe a cross-connection or potential cross-connection exists. And that's what I mentioned before about us trying, our goal is annually to go to different commercial and industries and just do a walkthrough and complete one of these inspections. And talking with different cities, a lot of them do them annually. Some of them do every 6 months. Some of them do quarterly, depending on the city. So it's just a refresher for us to continue to go through there to help them, help their customers, and help their employees.
And we have not had in the past employees who have the CSI certification. So the one thing we have done is to get 2 individuals, staff members who are qualified to be CSIs, and that's a new addition. So we would generally say we wouldn't need to use the CSIs from other communities. We're going to have our own trained and ready to do the inspections.
Yes, that is correct. In fact, on this next slide, by TCEQ regulations, there are 3 people or 3 types of people that are licensed or able to complete these. One is a licensed plumbing inspector. So as I mentioned, our licensed plumbing inspectors will complete these CSIs during new construction or additions. The third one at the bottom is a licensed plumber with a water supply protection specialist. We don't have any of those on staff, but the first bullet point is what we were just talking about there, Mayor, and that is a licensed customer service inspector. And so that's we'll call it the new item to this program.
These new inspections be for...
I ask that everyone be acknowledged before they
Excuse me,
speak.
ma'am.
Larry,
Sorry.
would you like to speak?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay.
These inspections for new construction, is that both residential and commercial?
Yes, that would be residential and commercial, and typically, in working with building permits, it would be done at the same time as the plumbing inspection. So it kind of go hand in hand. It would be these customer service inspections that would be kind of outside of those building permits component. Did that answer your question, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so just looking overall at a big picture of our cross-connection control program, we're here today talking about the customer service agreement. We are currently working on trying to strengthen our ordinance as well. We're in the draft phase right now. And so we will be bringing that back to council in the coming months. I don't have a time frame at this point. The one thing I do want council to know is that we have already engaged a development task force. We attended their May meeting and presented to them, and we will continue to do so to get the feedback from the development community. As we've, Mary, you mentioned the contamination as we've been working on these CSIs and trying to strengthen our program. We've talked to multiple plumbers, multiple business owners, managers of businesses, so on and so forth. So we're already trying to educate the public as it is as we complete these inspections, but we feel that going through the development task force is really beneficial as we bring it to council.
Has there been any specific issues that have been brought forward in the development task force meetings?
No, ma'am. When we talked to them in May, it was more of questions and clarifications, and some support by the development community.
Yes, Harry?
Question, Andy. We did backflow when I worked for Goodyear on, just on water fountains. I mean, and it was a yearly thing we had to do. So are 2 CSIs in the city of San Angelo enough to take care of inspecting every business and all of those backflow systems that are out there? Or are we looking at trying to educate, certify some additional ones in order for that program to be as stout as it can be and the citizens are ensured that that they're protected?
You're exactly correct. 2 is a start. 2 is where we're at now, and that was
That's a big increase. 0 to 2. I don't know what that increase percentage is, but it's big.
Yeah, so two is a start to get us going, to get us really engaged at this point. But yes, the plan is to add more staff and to have a separate division within the Water Utilities Department focused primarily on the cross-connection control program.
Allison, did you want to come forward and offer comment?
Allison Strube, Director of Water Utilities. As y'all are aware, we're about to begin the budget process. And as a part of that budget process is when you put in the personnel request. And so as a part of that process, we put in for that to have a total of 5 employees for that division. We're calling it the Water Protection Crew. And so that would include 5 CSIs that would be able to cover all of San Angelo for these inspections. Because 2, I don't know what we haven't calculated how many facilities they could see in that time, but as Andy being the assistant director, he is not solely dedicated to customer service inspections, but could help when times arise. But really, we are asking for 5 people as a part of that crew so that we can enhance that program, enforce that program, and make sure that we're doing all that we need to regulatory-wise.
0 to 5 is a really big increase.
Yes, ma'am.
And we functioned with 0 for how many years?
Ever. Forever.
So we will consider it.
Are there any additional questions?
Any questions, Tommy?
Just a clarification, Andy. I think I heard you say earlier that folks have already, that this would be applicable to, have been receiving notification annually of these requirements. So the folks, be it residential, commercial, industrial, they have already been saying you need to be aware of this. So anything we're going to do is not going to be brand new to some people. Is that correct? Or no?
Let me clarify on that. With regard to the annual notifications, those are for those that have existing backflow devices for health hazards that require annual testing. So businesses, commercial entities have not been having these customer service inspections on an annual basis. So it's specifically for those devices that have had the annual letter sent out to have their devices tested. So the improvement that we're looking at is by getting eyes on their facility. If we see a location that has either a non-health hazard or a health hazard, but a potential for contamination or pollutants, that we can then, at that point, say you need to install a backflow device. And I think the other thing for council is when we talk about backflow devices, it has a wide variety of what a backflow device is. It could be as simple as an air gap, meaning your pipe stops here and where it enters is here. That's considered an air gap. There is no mechanical device. And there are a number of different type of mechanical devices, from what's called an RPZ, a reduced pressure zone, backflow assembly, which is probably the most robust type of mechanical device for health hazards, all the way to a hose bib vacuum breaker, which you screw on to your hose bib before you attach the hose to it. And as I have this platform now, I'd recommend to anybody listening in the city that if you have a hose bib and you don't have a hose bib vacuum breaker, please install one at this point. Because one of the most common types of contamination comes from our hoses, from garden hoses. If you've ever seen a hose where somebody connects one of those chemical sprayers to it, if a line break happens within a proximity, it can create a back siphonage, and it can bring some of them chemicals either into the water system or, more importantly, or a lot of times more importantly, into plumbing systems. So if I'm at my house with one of those sprayers on there and something happens in the water system or my plumbing, it can suck some of them chemicals back in to my plumbing. In fact, as part of these training courses, we've heard numerous stories and read numerous stories of contamination events, some of them from simple garden hoses. There's been some other, mortuaries and things like that where some more severe type of circumstances, but that is the most simple thing that any resident of City of St. Angelo can do to help prevent and protect the water system and themselves.
So will there be anything new, and I hope I'm asking on behalf of the council this question. Most of us would probably be receiving calls from residential customers, not commercial or industrial. Is there anything that's going to be new in this program that folks that could have the potential issues are going to start receiving that they haven't, so that we're aware if they call us and say, I got this from the city, what in the world is it, that we can walk through that with them? So is there something new that residential customers that might have the potential for an issue be receiving?
From a residential standpoint, that is not our focus, other than new construction or if they get a building, plumbing permit.
Okay.
So from a residential standpoint, unless there's a complaint being issued, then it's very unlikely that, that type of circumstance, a CSI will be coming to their door. The other thing too is, initially when we had a contamination event, we canvassed, I think, approximately 80 different facilities up in one specific part of the city, and that's where our focus was. And so we were very quick on getting on it. We are now implementing a policy where we are calling these entities in advance to schedule an appointment to go back and visit them, or to visit them. And now we're in the process of some of those in that, we'll call it the northern area around Bell Street. We're going back and completing a second CSI inspection at this time as well.
Lucy?
Yes, Andy, I was going to, before you said that, I was going to ask you, when they did the CSIs because of the pollen contamination, did you find a lot of businesses or industrial areas that might have been non-compliant with?
We had
these rules?
approximately 80 different businesses that we visited. I believe, I'm going to say about mid-50s, so approximately 55 different businesses received letters of deficiencies. I'm going to say 35 of them approximately, all they needed to install were hose bib vacuum breakers on their hose bibs. 20 up, so approximately 20 of them, plus or minus, required some sort of a mechanical backflow device above a hose bib vacuum breaker. So yeah, there were some deficiencies that were noted, and I'll be honest with you, a lot of those folks that we visited with were definitely very accommodating to us, and were certainly willing to work with us.
I think the question is, because of the pollen issue, we had to do these inspections, but why weren't inspections done prior to contamination to have seen some of this a year ago, 2 years ago, 6 months before the contamination?
And that's a very good question, ma'am. The only thing I can answer to that right now is we can't go back and fix the past. We can only take a look at the past, review it, analyze it, and develop a program moving forward to reduce the potential for that to happen again.
Thank you. Any other questions from council before we move forward? Yes, Tom?
Andy, tell me, if somebody's doing commercial construction right now, have they been notified? I mean, I would hate for this to slow up a permit process or a construction process. So there's lots of commercial development going on right now. Are those people in the loop on being compliant with this?
That's a great question. So I mentioned before about development task force. We've had some cases where we've been working with engineering, building permits to try and spread the word. In fact, I'm going to say there's probably been 3 to 5 different new either permits or plats coming through where we've been engaged from water utility standpoint with regard to our CSIs of what type of backflow device do we need in this case. So by spreading the word internally with staff, we have been able to get their attention to help on the development side as well.
What I'm hoping for, if somebody's just opened their door, is planning to open the doors, they're non-compliant, we use some common sense and some patience and working around their schedule going forward, because I would hate this to come as a surprise and hit somebody's operational hours. But other than that, I'm good. Thanks, Andy.
Well, and that's a great point. We don't want to create any surprises, but at the same point, we're being, for anything that's existing facility, we're being regulated by TCEQ, and there's a human health component to it as well. So there is some very significant consequences to not following through as much as we can. And our intention is not to create a burden on anybody, but it is purely to protect our water system and to protect human health.
Protect our citizens. Yes. Any further questions right now? Okay, continue.
That is the end of my presentation. So if there's any additional questions or any further discussions on the customer service agreement.
Anything
to approve.
further?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, go ahead, Larry.
Are you telling me that any time a person pulls a plumbing permit, that they're going to have to go through this?
That is correct, for new construction or for an addition to their existing facility.
John, did you have comments?
Yeah, I could. For new construction, this is already in place. Our plumbing inspectors already inspect, and it's as part of the normal review process. So again, that's already being done for new construction. I think what Andy's talking about is other situations, but yeah, we're already doing that.
Okay, so do we need a motion to adopt this customer service agreement? So do I have a motion on the floor? Harry's made the motion. A second by Lucy. Any public comment?
Good morning, Mayor,
Good morning.
Council. Anna Bartosh, Single Member District 1. I'm really concerned. I have a home with a septic tank. We have an irrigation system. First of all, this seems to be in response to our water situation back in February when we had whatever in the water. The culprit who created that has never been identified publicly. So now I think we're doing a citywide broadscape. So that means with my septic system, I'm going to have people come over to the house and check the water, which is, I mean, that's what y'all said, anybody with a septic.
No, we were
is going
asking
to
about the
be-
septic system, so it does not mean that all of a sudden we're going to send out all these people to go house to house and inspect. Our focus is still going to be on commercial and industrial, not residential.
And also, from what somebody said about homes spraying, whatever, you've got fruit trees you're spraying, pecan trees you're spraying, that's going to involve anybody with or without a septic, because people in the city without septic spray their vegetation around their house. So that's going to involve the entire city.
It is. I mean, but again, we're not changing the policy on residential. I mean, these policies have been in place for how long?
No, we have
forever.
well water. We can drink the well water when it's not so salty. It's really salty, so it'll probably kill anything that gets in there. But
Probably.
Anyway,
Become resistance after a while, they adapt.
My background is micro, and I know what organisms like salt and which ones don't. And most things cannot really adapt to salt. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Further public comment? With none, we have a motion and a second. We've had public comment. We'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Motion passes 7-0. Item B, discussion and update on Chapter 3, Animal Control, Article 3.10, Free Roaming Community Cats of the City's Code of Ordinances. And Morgan, you're on.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. We were asked to come and speak about the community cat ordinance and all that goes into it and what our practices are regarding community cats. And so I do have some talking points, but we can certainly dialogue on, which ones y'all would like to spend more time on. I did just want to, from a broad stroke, we do cat intake for San Angelo residents. You can bring in for no charge. If you want it picked up, there is the fee of $25. If you've been caring for the animal for a prescribed amount of time, you may rehome that through support services. That's usually an appointment with our rescue partner, Contra Valley
Stop
Paws.
right there. So obviously, we're talking about feral cats a lot. So if someone's trying to protect the area by picking up a feral cat, why does someone who picks one up off of their backyard who they don't own or whatever have to pay a fee?
That is defined in the ordinance for anything to be picked up that's not top 5 for rabies or wildlife, that it is a $25 pickup fee. And that could be possums, cats, deceased animal remains, that pickup fee includes.
It's pretty broad, and I think my big issue is it's one thing if it's a skunk, it's a possum, it's a whatever, but feral cats are becoming a bigger and bigger problem in the community, and no one's going to spend any time worrying about it if, in fact, picking up a feral cat is going to have a fee attached to it.
I think part of it is because of the draw on staff time. I think in the past when there wasn't a fee, there would be sometimes one animal services officer that their entire shift was picking up cats. And so part of it was to redirect staff to priority services like bite calls, cruelty cases, those that are top 5 for rabies. So I believe that was part of that conversation as well.
Morgan, if the citizen bring the cat in, is there a fee?
No, as long as they've not been feeding and caring for it for a prescribed amount of time. So
How do you determine that?
The ordinance defines it as
like
3 days.
All you have to do is say, no, I haven't fed it.
Yes, I was going to ask you, Morgan, the reason that I had asked for this update was because I have constituents that are saying that they have a cat problem. I don't know if they're feral cats or just cats that have come from somewhere else, but they are seeking shelter under their home. The person has allergies. She cannot round them up or trap them or anything. And, of course, they're not going to pay $25 to have them removed from their property. So what kind of solution would you come up with for that situation?
Sure, we can skip to the end if you like. I did go through what all's defined in the ordinance, what's required by each of the groups, what our services and practices have been in the past, what services should be performed to appropriately manage a cat population in a community.
Which we have. A cat problem in the community.
Sure. So would you like to go through the recommendations about what would be involved to manage that?
Yes.
Sorry, I was trying to answer your question first, which is at the, which is further along. So the ordinance does provide for the Animal Shelter Advisory Committee to set policy related to community cats. Before 2018, community cats that were not ear-notched were euthanized, and that is described as catch and kill. In 2018, we launched a shelter-neuter return, which prevents the vacuum effect of new cats coming in and the population being unstabilized and booming and growing. We did that for not quite 3 years, late 2018, all of 2019, and most of 2020. In 2020, the committee had to consider returning to field unaltered cats because the funding for shelter-neuter return was not continued or available.
And where did that funding go, and who provided it
In
initially?
2018, we launched shelter-neuter return with some salary savings out of the existing animal services budget. We had $20,000 that we expended on almost 1,000 cats that were spay-neutered and returned to field. In 2020, due to coronavirus, salary savings were frozen, and of course, a funding request was submitted through annual budget, but it was something that couldn't be considered at that time to be continued. So in October 2020, the previous practice of euthanizing cats was no longer conducive to the no-kill initiative. And so for a very short time period, less than 3 months, we did consider returning to field unaltered cats. What's saving cats right now is our rescue partner, Concho Valley Paws, is pulling all of our community cats and spay-neutering them through their resources.
So they've taken over that responsibility, so it's no longer in your responsibility.
Well, to the extent that they have resources to offer, they will continue to offer that. There's no long-term solution to that.
Does any community have a long-term solution?
It's an annual investment in shelter-neuter return, which all cats coming in would be spay-neutered and returned to their area to prevent the vacuum effect. Because as I mentioned, catch and kill in the past hasn't worked. It's something that animal control and municipalities have been doing for decades. When you remove cats from the area and don't return them, it creates a vacuum. Cats from outside move in. They fill that empty territory. It's counterproductive. That population rebounds to be even more than it was previously. And I think that that's what we're experiencing right now in San Angelo, is decades of catch and kill. But trap, neuter, return is effective because there's no more litters, the population stabilizes, and I think the main concern that I've gotten from several council members is the nuisance that comes with community cats. And TNR does stop the stress and nuisance. It reduces mating behaviors, spraying, yowling, fighting. Those are many of the complaints that we're getting from citizens saying, you know, there's this colony, there's all this nuisance going on, and so TNR would stop that. And so I think that there's a primary concern. The ordinance is not real clear on how they define a nuisance, but I think we could all agree that certain things are nuisances. For example, spraying, defecating in flower beds, going under homes, for property owners who are not the ones feeding it and not the ones responsible. And so, although that should be reported to the sponsoring organization in the ordinance, and then the colony caregivers given 30 days to resolve, I think that one thing that the council could consider today is investing in an allocation for those nuisance colonies. Let us develop something to go back to them, and identify those colonies which are nuisances. So I'm sure that any one of you could give me addresses today, as could I, of folks that are calling in saying, you know, this colony is out of control or this colony is a nuisance. And so if we did take those colonies that are reaching a level of a nuisance, that we could allocate some money for spay, neuter, and return of those so that we could control those behaviors, we could control the undesirable behavior, and we would report back to council any of the progress for those nuisance colonies specifically.
Lucy, go ahead.
Morgan, when was the last time that y'all spayed or neutered any cats at the animal shelter?
We don't spay neuter at the animal shelter.
Okay, well, I thought you had a budget, and I thought that y'all used it to spay and neuter the cats out there.
So in 2018, with our salary savings, we were spay neutering through private vet clinics. So we would take trapped cats that had been brought in, and a community cat is any unowned cat that's thriving outside. So it could be wild, it could be tame, but if they pass a 30-point check inspection, they are considered for spay, neuter, and return to their area. And so for
30-point inspection, what's that?
I'm just
That's a
curious,
lot.
I got to stop it right there.
Yeah.
What's
A
a
lot.
30-point
Yeah.
inspection on a cat?
Well, it is.
You know what, let's don't go there.
yeah, I was
Let's-
gonna say,
Maybe we
let's
don't want to
don't
know
go-
it
let's
all,
don't go there.
but that sounds like a lot to pass.
It's generally, are they at a healthy weight and thriving in their natural environment?
If somebody's gonna stir it, I might as well be the one. So my issue here, Morgan, it's sometimes it isn't the cat, sometimes you have a human that's more than nuisance with these cat colonies, anybody else. They won't let you come on. They've got a house. I've got a couple in my district, and me and you have emailed over it. And the lady won't let anybody come on the property. I mean, I won't, and there's a person that won't let you come in and who doesn't try to control that population. And I've got a constituent with a beautiful house right over here, which apparently is inviting for all the cats to come over and use the lawn. But I mean, how do we address something like that? I mean, that's the
Right.
one where I get the phone call, is a constituent's just like, you know what? I'm watching them hop in and out of that house over there, and it's 10 different cats going in and out the window. You know,
And if I could
they
back
come
up-
over here and he traps them, and they're over there and he catches them, then we want to charge him $30 to get rid of the darn thing.
I think that's one thing that could be considered in the $5,000 allocation is animal services officer staff time to retrieve those animals, a waiver of certain fees to specifically work those nuisance colonies down to an appropriate level. And just to speak to, there are certain requirements set forth in the ordinance. Colony caregivers are required to spay, neuter, and vaccinate those animals, as well as a number of
Well,
other
it
things.
sounds great
And
to
it's-
say they're required to do it, but who's checking?
Yes, ma'am. And it is a requirement to report it to the sponsoring organization, and we're finding that that also is not working. And so.
Which is can, I mean, it's so, I mean, it's not a policy that I would consider very effective at all. It's great on paper, but in reality, it's not effective, and it will never be effective. Yes, Lucy?
Morgan, so tell me, they trap the cat, they bring him to the animal shelter, what do you do with him from that point on?
If it's a community cat that's not a nuisance, we would spay, neuter it, and return it to the area to prevent the colony from growing.
And how much?
Right now, Concho Valley Paws is doing that.
So you take it to Concho Valley to spade and neuter, because you said they don't do it at the animal shelter, correct?
Concho Valley Paws is pulling all of our community cats right now to
And
spay
how
and
much does it
neuter.
cost to spade and neuter a cat?
I don't know what they're spending, but we were spending $45 for a neuter, $65 for a spay, plus the rabies vaccine.
Probably
And
$100
Is that the
per
same
animal.
price that vets pay?
we were, the prices I'm quoting are what we were paying through 2018 to 2020 through a private vet clinic.
Okay. Tommy, did you have a question
You
or
know,
comment?
maybe the wisest course here would to seriously consider allocating Morgan some funds and let them really focus on these cat colonies that they know, apparently they know where they are, maybe even know the individuals involved, and see if we can't make some progress in that regard, because, you know, we're kind of having a circular conversation here. So maybe we need to give Morgan some tools to address the issue. That's my thought.
Harry?
My concern is very similar to what the council's already said. I mean, I can sit on my front porch in the afternoon and watch cat after cat after cat going up and down the street. And I suspect that somebody is feeding those cats, but they're not tagged. I mean, so I suspect that they're probably neighborhood cats that somebody basically has inadvertently adopted. And I tell constituents all the time when I get a phone call, if you're feeding them, they're your cat. You've got to take care of them. You've got to find out what you're going to do with them. I think the point I'm trying to get here is we know that the animal shelter typically is not handling these community cats today. That's done by other organizations. How many, have we made any progress, I guess, in the last 3 or 4 years? How many of those cats are out there that we know of? Is that population truly down compared to what it was 2 years ago? You say 27%. I still see a lot of cats, and I really don't, I don't know that the program's really is as robust as I would like to see it. So to Tommy's point, maybe we need to give you some more tools.
I think the question mark is how much money you're going to throw at it and throw away by doing that.
True.
Because it's not changing the problem. And so I think, number one, we need to make sure we have a pretty big, aggressive public information communication going out there. I haven't heard anything from the city in a recent, 4 years, about trying to communicate to the public and bringing a lot more awareness to the situation. We need to start with communicating the issue. Because we don't have enough money to throw at this to make a difference. We just don't, not in this huge, big city. You might make a difference in one little tiny area. It's not going to change. And we don't have the money to spend. $5,000 is not even going to make a dent in this problem. It just isn't. It might start, but it's not. Lucy.
Morgan, I just wanted to ask you, if people wanted to trap these cats, where are they supposed to get the traps from?
At the local store.
You know that's not going to happen. Everybody wants, hey, I need your help and I need it now.
Well, I think for these nuisance ones that have come to a head today, that part of the $5,000 could be for the purchase and provision of traps for the city to run a TNR program specifically for those nuisance colonies. It's not meant to serve citywide. It's meant to serve these that are making it to y'all's level, quite frankly.
So if you use some of this money for traps, then the citizen could actually call, get a trap the cat, bring the cat back, and give you the trap back, or how would you keep up with that?
Sure, if that's the council's direction, yes, ma'am.
I was just wondering about this constituent that, is having this problem on her property. I don't know if she's feeding them. I don't know any about that. All it is that her complaint is that she can't even go out there because she's allergic to them. So I was just like, what do we do when we have that problem within the city?
Well, a lot of these cats survive without someone feeding them. They know how to catch rats and mice and other things. So it does not mean that someone's always feeding them. They're pretty adapted. And listen, a lot of dumpsters have a lot of food in them. And so they're going to survive regardless of whether someone feeds them or not. But I think, it's great to say we're going to throw some money at it. I don't want to throw money at it if I don't have a program that I think is going to make a difference, period.
And that is why I included the component of reporting back to y'all.
Do you think 5,000 will make a difference that we can significantly judge and measure, Morgan?
I think for these nuisance colonies, it could make a tremendous difference.
Colonies do you think you have identified?
Half a dozen today that I could identify the location, or that y'all could provide the location. Some I've just heard of, but I don't know the location. But if we could tackle half a dozen colonies, get them really healthy and spay-neutered, I think that could provide some relief to citizens in need.
$800 a community, a colony might, if we average out the 5,000, might get you there. Because I know of one in my district. All right, I know there's 6 of us here, but I think you have the most stressful job in the city, maybe next to the water department in February. But anyway, long story short, the animal shelter is a huge budget, very little return, no income. It's less than probably 6-7% income on it. But these are things that are very, very visible in the public eye. And I'd be willing to give this a try once.
I will only support that if we have a public information strategy. I won't do it and won't support it if we don't have something going out there and re-educating the public about the problem, what to do, how to do it, et cetera, because then we're just throwing money at it and nothing changes. We have to have public information strategy on this. It won't work otherwise. It might not work anyway, but without one,
And we're only talking about community cats. Sorry, Mayor.
Yes, Harry, go ahead.
We're only talking about the community cats. You're not talking about the neighborhood cats that don't belong to anybody, that probably are not spayed and neutered. Those cats are every bit as much of the problem as community cats are. So the education that the mayor's talking about really needs to go citywide and not specifically just for these colonies that we already know are out there. There's too many of them, cats roaming around in the neighborhood that are probably not vaccinated, almost guaranteed that they're not spayed and neutered.
And they probably do control the mice and rat problem, so there is something out there to say, you know, there is a benefit in some way on that. It's not enough to make people happy, but there is a reason to believe that they do control some of the rodents in our communities. But I have no problem. I'm not sure where we're going to get the 5,000.
That's what I'm curious.
So we would
Plan
have
there.
to have, Tina, would you, or Daniel, where do we get 5,000?
We have had savings. I mean, she mentioned a while ago, Morgan mentioned a while ago, the hiring freeze and the monies that actually were built up from that. So we'll take care of that part of it. You know, we just need your support with what's being presented at this point, so.
There's support if I have a program, if I have a public information strategy that goes with it.
We'll make sure that happens, Mayor, especially the
Ma'am?
communication.
Yes, Larry?
I'm curious if there's a code compliance factor that could be built into this, too. If a lady has 25 cats in her house, well, it presents a health problem on top of everything else.
Well, code compliance is an issue, but we also have, Morgan, how many people do you have who react and follow up and go to houses, et cetera?
I have 4 animal services officers.
There you go. We have 4 doing that already. All right, so we're going to do public information strategy. I want to have an update on that at the next meeting and make sure we're aggressive at communicating, use every available opportunity to talk to the public about it and make sure they're well aware of the problem. And most, as we always say, the reason we have an animal shelter is because we have people. People create the problem. It's only with people will the problem stop. Cats don't make themselves the problem. People help make the problem happen. Otherwise, we wouldn't have an animal shelter. Okay, is council okay with that?
I'll move to approve as presented.
Okay, do we need a motion? So Tom has made a motion. Do I have a second?
I will second that.
Lucy will have a second. Any public comment? With none, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Item C, discussion and guidance for amending Chapter 5, Business and Commerce, Article 5.02, Alcoholic Beverages Regulations, Section 5.02.005, Sale, Possession, or Consumption in Texas Bank Sports Complex. And Brent, you are on.
Good morning, Mayor. Daniel,
morning.
City Council. Which button is it?
The one that says go?
We can do that 30-point inspection on Tom while we're waiting.
Opposite.
I think we'll have a diagram
Way to go,
on that,
Brent. Now you broke it.
30-point inspection.
I
to
have
me.
got a
Leave it up to
great
the
story at
president.
some point for you.
Okay, thank you.
Green?
Green
we
means
can't have
go.
All right,
toy.
thank you. Sorry about that.
I want the
Okay, yes,
30-point.
Go
we're
button.
Yeah, I think that's it.
green.
Oh,
All
welcome,
right.
Brent.
We'll get up and stretch now, too. Okay, so we're looking for guidance on Texas Bank Sports Complex concerning the alcohol beverage regulations that are out there. Currently, the ordinance does not allow for alcohol to be taken into the complex, meaning inside the fenced-in gate area, which, let me try this again. There we go. So basically, all of the circular quadrants, there's a fence right there, circular kind of over here. But any of the outside areas, to include the grassy area over here, this parking lot, the grass area here, this entire parking lot here, or this parking lot up here, which is where the RVs park, they are allowed to bring in alcohol according to the current ordinance.
But isn't that kind of confusing to begin with? Because how do you know where and who and what and whatever. If some of it is and some of it isn't, who can manage that?
That's what they'll get into here in a minute. The reason the original ordinance was like that is because that area is to allow what this will hopefully correct today for this
Perfect.
complex.
And the park is located right there, actually. So yes, you are allowed to take it into the park. You currently can have it in the parking lot area, but you cannot bring it into the fenced-in area, which we have covered. What we kind of come up with 3 suggestions, possible options that we could look at. Number 1 is leave it as it is and allow alcohol in the parking lot, but not allow it inside the park, the fenced-in area of the Texas Bank Sports Complex. Number 2, the entire complex go no alcohol to include the parking lot, the park, except for a special event with contracted concessionaire, which sometimes we do. And number 3 is designate an area where alcohol may be consumed, such as the park area that we circled just a minute ago, but include the parking lot as part of the ordinance, which is
Like
inside
number
the fence.
2.
You like number 2, entire complex?
Just so you know, currently the policy is there's no alcohol in the complex for youth events, not an option. For adult events, it is allowed so long as the city concessionaire serves the alcohol. So San Angelo Host is and so this allows that to continue to happen so long as San Angelo Host is the server. And then
Yeah, because when you start, you can, you can't, you will, you won't. Who's there to monitor it? Because the issue is having an ordinance in place where you have the ability to monitor it. And when you have options of yes or no, you can, you can't, that little area yes, that little area no, no one can, we don't have enough staff to monitor that situation. So the only way you can do it is yes or no. No
Just
in
to
between.
clarify with council, I'm assuming if we go with number 2, what you're saying is basically from Bell Street to the end of the ball field. So that entire park area from Bell Street throughout the complex is what you're considering number 2.
And what happens with the RVs? Because that becomes the next complexity to this.
That parking lot where the RVs park is considered part of the complex parking lot, so.
So how do you manage that?
Well, it goes back to, the whole thing revolves around if, at this point, the parking lot would be considered within the complex. We don't have enough staff to manage that.
That's the point.
But if a incident is arising and you have this rule in place or they notice something, then PD does now have the ability to enforce. So PD could be called and they have the ability to force in the parking lot versus now they don't because there's no rule about it.
I'm going to stop right here and see if there's any questions or comments from council at this point in the presentation. Okay, so then continue, Brent.
That's just it, we're looking for.
Oh, that's it.
Yes, ma'am, we're looking for guidance on
Like
which
that
way you want to go.
presentation. Good job, Brent. 3-slide rule.
Okay, so in my mind, it has to be number 2 because when you have some areas yes and some areas no, it's too hard to know when you walk up, when you step over the magic yellow line. So for me, it's a no alcohol, including except for contracted concessionaire. That makes sense, Lucy?
So what you're saying is, okay, for the kids' events, it was no alcohol whatsoever, but for the adults, there was. So now what are we saying, that absolutely no for the adults also?
No, you're saying you can have.
You can buy it at the concession
If,
stand. you
yes,
just
if they
cannot
do
have it.
that. They're required to have insurance and police presence, those kind of things for an adult event if they contract. But they're saying you can't bring it and leave it in your car and go back out to the parking lot and drink and then walk back into the complex. That's not allowed anymore.
Because at some point, I'm assuming that we have events where it's both adult and children.
Some of the children come and watch the adults, but if it's a children event, like a youth baseball tournament, for example, then no, we would not allow any alcohol to be sold or whatever.
Does council have any issues against using number 2 as our, Tom?
What do you think's the best one? Your park.
It's kind of a rough one, in my opinion, because it's going to be even a major disaster to enforce it. In the parking lot, it's a major disaster to enforce it inside the fenced-in area right now. As the mayor said, we don't have enough staff to be everywhere at every time. I mean, when I get phone calls, I go out there and tell them, get rid of it right now. Give them a warning. If they don't, then we've switched in the past to, hey, every player on your team, that's an out that we could catch you with on the field. So we've done that. That doesn't help the sport. That doesn't help anything. So it gets rid of the alcohol, but it also makes a lot of upset people. So the parking lot, I think I would also like to see something maybe brought up about the RVs for when we do have tournaments. I know if I'm staying in my RV, then I would like to have something in my RV. But, that's just
Yes,
me.
but you can have a policy where you may have it in the RV, but you can't take it outside the RV onto the fields or onto the ballpark.
But I think if we do that, we could get to where the people could go in their car. It's still the parking lot, and so you'd have to another exception. I think in this case, it's either in the parking lot or not.
Here's what we do know. We cannot have another episode of what happened several weeks ago, and with no ability to control or manage it because we don't have an ordinance that allows for control and management. We have to have an ordinance that allows for control and management of it, because in 2 weeks, if we have another gun incident out there, it will be a problem. We have to have an ordinance that helps control it and gives us the opportunity to use enforcement.
Part of this, as Brett say, will be who is running the event to help us enforce that. So right now, if he has a rental, we have one staff member out there.
It depends on how many quads they're using, how many fields they're using.
So not a lot of staff. If Daniel is running a tournament, so they're running it. We don't have a ton of staff out there. So those renters have to help us enforce that, whoever's running the tournament.
I think number one, just 1 second here. I think once again, I'm going to ask for some public information to help express what we're going to do in terms of managing it. But we cannot open ourselves up to another situation that happened. I think everyone that was there did a great job of managing it, controlling it, and couldn't be more proud of how people responded to it. But we got to have an ordinance that helps us control any possible future problem. And we're crazy if we're not looking at what's happening in the news and do something about it. Harry?
Yes. Clarification from my standpoint, in other city venues, this one for example, we require police officers to be there if any alcohol is going to be involved. Do you do that at any of these tournaments?
We do if the concessionaire is selling it, yes, then the concessionaire has to be there. And same for this facility right here.
I'd be willing to support number 2 then.
Any further comments? All right, may I have a motion to approve number 2? Just this is a direction only. And what we ought to do, first of all, let's start some public information on this. But then number 2, let's use this for the next, today's June, so through August, and then you come back and report to us in terms of things that emerged, problems that existed that weren't thought through when we put this in place. But we ought to try to execute this, implement this, and see what happens with it, and does that work?
And Mayor, that'll work real well because I think Brent has taken to his Parks and Recreation Board a reevaluation of all of our basically facilities and what the policies are around that. So when he brings those recommendations, he can bring this back at that time too for y'all to look at any issues that happen.
Okay. And meanwhile, we'll get some information out through our communications department on our new options.
I think today's discussion was just for general guidance. In order to change the alcohol policy, that does require 2 readings. It's written in the ordinance.
So we do need action.
It's not on there for,
Take action
correct.
today. We have to bring it back in a formal ordinance change.
Okay.
I'll bring back number 2.
Okay. Perfect. Meanwhile, we'll start on the public and the communications department, getting some messaging out there. Okay. Thank you very much. Item D, first reading and public hearing on an ordinance of Z21-05, a rezoning from the single-family residential zoning district to the neighborhood commercial zoning district being .30 acres located at 2321 South Bryant Boulevard and 504 West Avenue T. 2, an ordinance for Z21-06, a request for approval of a rezoning from the heavy commercial zoning district to the heavy manufacturing zoning district being 7.353 acres located at 4125 Dan Hanks Lane. And 3, an ordinance approving the abandonment of 2,250 square feet or a 15 by 150 feet alley on the south side of East 41st Street between Oaklawn Street and Bowie. And 4, an ordinance approving the abandonment of a 2,250 square feet or 15 feet by 150 feet alley on the north side of East 44th Street between Oaklawn and Bowie Street.
Thank you. John James, Director of Planning and Development Services. The reason all 4 of these items are combined into one agenda item is that they were all recommended by staff. They were all unanimously recommended by the Planning Commission, and none of them had any opposition from either the surrounding property owners or anyone for that matter. And so, as we've done a few times in the past, we've combined those, and it'll be an abbreviated presentation because there's basically no opposition and no controversy surrounding any of these. So this first one is a rezoning on South Bryant. It is for 2 properties. The one property has been historically a bakery and small restaurant, family-owned. It has been closed for a number of years now, but the son is now wishing to reopen the family bakery and possibly restaurant. And so because it was non-conforming in a residential zone, it requires this rezoning to a commercial district to allow that to continue. Again, it is on South Bryant. It's designated in our comprehensive plan as neighborhood center, which makes rezoning appropriate to a commercial. You can see this area here is all already commercial, so it would just be adding those 2 properties to that existing commercial zone. Just a couple of pictures of, this is the one property, and then this is the adjacent property that has an old home on it that could be very likely demolished for parking or something like that. It just made sense, since there's commercial on the other side of it, to rezone both properties. As I mentioned, the Planning Commission voted to approve it unanimously, and the staff is recommending approval. I'll stop there for any questions, but my intention was to go through all 4 cases, and you could make one motion on all 4. But if you have any questions on that one.
Any questions on this so far? No. Continue.
Okay, this next item is on Dan Hanks Lane. It is for a rezoning from heavy commercial to heavy manufacturing. It is for a chemical processing company. You can see our future plan shows all of this as industrial, so it's consistent with that. But as you can see here, some of the areas, that pink color, the heavy commercial, but it's a mixture of heavy commercial and industrial zoning. This would just take it to the heavy commercial, which is what it would be required for the particular use that's proposed. You can see that company's existing location is in the general vicinity. This would be a new location nearby. And just a couple of pictures of the subject property itself, which is a previously used but currently vacant property. I won't read through all of these. It's in the staff report and your background information, but just many of the reasons why staff is supportive, as well as the Planning Commission. Again, the Planning Commission did unanimously recommend approval, as did staff. Be happy to answer any questions on that one before I move on.
Questions from anyone on council? There are no questions, so do I have a motion for approval?
I'm sorry, we have 2 more.
2 more.
Keep going.
Best is yet to come.
These are 2 alley abandonments. You can see this one here near 41st Street. Just a picture of it. This one is used a little bit. And then our recommendation includes 3 conditions. Again, Planning Commission unanimous, staff recommended. The 3 conditions are that they replat their property to include the alley, payment of the fee that's in the city ordinance or the resolution, and then a recordation of a quitclaim deed after the plat approval. This one, I'll note, does not include any easements. There are no utilities, and so all the utility companies were fine completely abandoning the alley. If there are no questions on that one.
Now I'll ask if there's any further questions, and if not, a motion for approval.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
One
one
more.
more.
One more.
Hang on, Mayor.
This
Hang
is
on.
very similar.
Little traction time up here today.
This is another alley. This one actually is not used at all as an alley, but there are some utilities in there. There's a picture you can see. It's a platted alley, but not existent on the ground. And so these are the same three conditions as the previous case, but one additional condition. Because there is a sewer main through that alley, the abandonment would include the requirement to maintain a sewer easement through that property when it's replatted. And with that, that's all I have.
I'm not going to say it again, but may
You
I
might need an
have-
environmental survey on the removal of that cactus there, but other than that,
Okay, there you go.
District
So-
2 is good. Our constituents want that.
Any other questions, concerns by anybody? Then, Tom, that's a motion.
I move to approve.
Second.
And a second by Tommy. Any public comment? With none, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. We'll move on to item E. First public hearing and introduction of an ordinance amending the budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2020, and ending September 30th, 2021 for unplanned expenditures.
Thank you, Mayor. Tina Deersky, Director of Finance. I just have a budget amendment for you this morning, only one budget amendment, and it is to budget for the payment to JEXA that we discussed at the last city council meeting, the ancillary charges in the amount of about $723,000. And I'm waiting for the PowerPoint just so you can see how that was
Has
allocated
there been
out.
any further communication with various parties on this issue?
I have, as I told you all in the last meeting, I reached out to FEMA and TDEM, the Texas Department of Emergency Management, to seek any recourse that they could offer or any assistance that they could offer. I have still remained in contact with our representative there, and so far have not received a definitive response from them.
And are we communicating with other cities to find out what they're doing as well to resolve this issue?
I know that, for example, City of Lubbock is also reaching out to TDEM and FEMA is taking those requests on a case-by-case basis. So there is a marginal chance that we could receive some assistance, but we won't know until they come down with a response.
There've got to be many more cities.
I'll follow up with the city managers as well, Mayor, just to make sure to see what they're doing on their part. But I know that there's a lot of cities that were affected by this as well.
There have to be, and I want to know what other cities are doing, if some good maybe information from them in terms of what they're doing. Yes, Teresa?
Yeah, there's also been a lot of conversation on my city attorney group, and most people are paying, some are having to take out bonds to do it. So it is an ongoing discussion looking for options both from the Texas legislature as well as from FEMA.
Yeah, we just will need to stay persistent on this.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Tom?
Level that is, that's almost windfall profit gouging. I mean, for the time period and what it is, but I think collectively we'll have to see a bunch of us as cities gather up to battle this, but I'm all for it if we can go find it.
Use every tool in the toolbox, and in this case, it's gathering all cities together and fighting the issue. Power in numbers. All right.
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
So as we discussed, we'll be using marginal sales tax revenue from the current fiscal year to address the portion that has been allocated to the general fund in the amount of $423,423. And the water and sewer funds, that will come from their fund balances respectively. And these are being allocated based on meter usage, and so that's why these amounts were charged to the water and to the water reclamation funds.
So those three things added up equals the $728,000.
Yes, ma'am. Should we receive any assistance or recourse, we will put that money back to these funds proportionately in the way that we charge them.
Do I have a motion to approve the budget amendment?
So moved.
Moved by Tommy, seconded by Lucy. Any public comment? With none, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
7-0 passes. Item F, discussion and guidance of providing in-kind support for the All Veterans Council request for a proposed 10-year agreement with the city to waive fees for the annual Veterans Day Parade. Daniel, you're on.
Mayor, so we did receive a request for assistance and in-kind support, things such as setting up barriers by staff, security by police officers. Now, the request has been made in the past, and we've done it on a year-by-year basis. This year, the request is a little bit different because they're asking for a 10-year consideration. Now, we're comfortable moving forward at this point with a 1 year, and I know that and I'll let Teresa talk a little bit about this as well. Our concern is, of course, we know that city council changes the chief of police position as well next couple of years. It may change or may not change depending on what happens there. But we don't want to commit to future councils to a long-term agreement with any one group at this point. So that's one of our biggest concerns. But we just wanted to get some direction from city council as to what it is that y'all would like to see happen, though. So, Teresa,
Harry,
I'm not sure.
wait a minute. Harry first.
Mm-hmm.
As a veteran, I've supported this Veterans Day Parade for a long time. I appreciate the fact that the All Veterans Council gets ahead, in the last couple of years at least, has gotten ahead of the curve in requesting this information long before this first Saturday in November. I understand 10 years is a long time, and you've got issues out there with the police chief possibly being another police chief being in there, so can't make those decisions for those officers that are required. But I would make a suggestion that we look at 3 years. Present police chief will be there for an additional 3 years, and make this a 3-year agreement instead of having the All Veterans Council have to come back to the council every time to do that. This is the best run Veterans Day Parade in the state. It is recognized by not only Senator Perry, but also Senator Cruz as being something that they want to support. So from my perspective, I'd like to make it a multi-year, 3-year.
Teresa?
Yeah, as Daniel was saying, the city charter does provide the police chief has the sole discretion over the officers. And so, as Harry stated, that we would not be able to extend beyond Chief Carter's term, which we were talking, we think it's actually 2 years based on when the election would happen. That would be 2 more Veterans Days. But if you're going to make an approval for more than 1 year, then the maximum you could do was Chief Carter's term. Also, you should consider the precedent this sets when we're approving these parades. There are some speech issues that become related in these. If other groups come that you don't necessarily approve of the message or approve of the group, it's really hard to tell them no when you've said yes to others. It does create a precedent that we would have to unite against. I think this one particular parade that we sponsor, this is a national holiday, and so this is a little bit unique from other messages that are out there that are sometimes paraded through cities, but that is another consideration you should keep in mind. My preference is always to put it on a case-by-case basis.
That being said, we've done it over the past couple years and haven't created a problem with that. I think this city has always been really well known for the support of its veterans. I think we need to keep that messaging out there that we support our veterans, that the military is an important part of this city, and our support of all things military is really important. So knowing what the ordinance says, I would say then let's do it for 2 years. That lives within the regulations required by the election of our police chief, and at least gets us 2 more years, and then we'll deal with it as we have a new police chief. Does that work? Ordinances kind of get in the way sometimes, don't they?
Well,
okay. Or city charters. Yes, go ahead, Tom.
So it brings up, the precedents we set moving forward, because there's some other parades out there that, in size and quantity, and I don't know how many we have, but there's some out there that if we waive it for this one, we're going to waive it for a lot of them.
Well, we waived it last year and we waived it the year before, so I'm just.
It's a case-by-case basis.
It's a case-by-case basis.
I understand that, though.
I think we'll have to learn to say no if it doesn't have the same. We just have to say no. But I think the military is something hugely important, and we've always been that kind of a community as it relates to our veterans, and I think we should continue that messaging. All right, with that, Harry is going to revise his motion To be,
Motion to approve for 2 years.
is there a second? Second. Second by Lucy. Any public comment? With none, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. We'll now move into our closed session, which there is none, and so we'll move on to item 8, follow-up and administrative issues. There was no closed session, so there's no A to consider. And B is consideration of approving various board nominations, the Public Art Commission, Rael Ruiz, SMD 5, and Elaine Stribling, SMD 6, both to first terms ending April 2023. Do I have a motion? A move by Lane, a second by?
Second.
Second. And any public comment? With none, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. And then item C, announcements and consideration of future agenda items. Are there any? With none, we'll move into adjournment. May I have a motion for adjournment?
I'll move.
Second? Any public comment? Third, fourth, and fifth. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Meeting is adjourned officially at 9:58 a.m. on the 15th of June, 2021.